This episode is brought to you by Portland Distro. If you like underground music, movies, and more, go to portlanddistro.com for licensed merch, vinyl, CDs, and more. Plug in the discount code 10OFF, TENOFF, for a 10% discount at portlanddistro.com. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to this week's episode of Everything Went Black. I've got Ralph Schmidt here for another episode of our ongoing series, The Metaphysics Of. How's it going, Ralph?
I'm doing fine, Mike. Thanks for having me again. Hello, everybody. A long time. I think the last thing we did was the Towns Van Zandt, Roy Orbison episode, right?
Yes, and people seem to really appreciate that. And I have done a pretty deep dive into Towns Van Zandt, and thank you for introducing me to his work.
And do you like it?
Oh yeah, man, it's great. It's kind of exactly the kind of music that I need to hear right now. Just
yeah,
you know, as we were talking before, going through a little bit of a melancholy period here, moving, not soon enough, honestly, but moving to a new location. So my apartment is all the artwork is off the walls except for one Misfits poster, and my books are packed away. So I feel like I'm living in like a box right now. So, you know, so that creates like this liminal space sort of vibe. And, you know, this music kind of helps me through that a little bit.
Yeah. It's good that we have an uplifting topic today.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, like I got like a lot of props through my Instagram channel and also on the Patreon that people contacted me and said like, yeah, I've always heard the name Towns Van Zandt, but never really took a deep dive. And thanks for the playlist and for like giving tips on it. And I mean, I also did like a way deeper dive into Roy Orbison now. So I think the classics thing is something we should continue as well. But we also got great feedback on the Metaphysics of episode 1, and now we're back for episode 2, and so let's see where this goes.
Yeah, thanks everybody. You know, we do experiment here. You know, we're experimental, and I think you know, we try different things, and I'm glad to hear that some people, a lot of people seem to enjoy it, and your feedback is always welcome. And you know, especially you guys out on Patreon. You know, out on the Patreon platform, we got a really active community, a lot of back and forth with people. You know, a lot of people stay in touch. They give us their recommendations and feelings about certain things. And I just feel really fortunate to have a community like that, you know. And if anyone wants to join and support the show for $1 a month, you can join and you get access to the bonus material, which at this point is weekly. We got weekly, what the staff picks. We have whole shows that are out on Patreon, different sub shows, things like that. And for $5 a month, you can get all the bonus material plus early access to episodes. And if you want to sponsor the show with your business, project, band, whatever, even your own podcast, you can subscribe to the $25 a month Patreon level, which will give you one ad read per month. You can do it just for 1 month. Someone did it for 1 month. Or you can do it for as long as you want. And, of course, the whole thing with Patreon is voluntary. You don't have to – you could do it for 1 month, decide you don't want to give me $1, and you could cancel it. That's totally cool. Before we get going, I also want to shout out the other horsemen. You know, we got this excellent group of guys that release material –
Remember?
Dude, hit that again.
Wait.
All right, let's line that up.
Here's the plugs for our friends. which the group is called?
The Horsemen of the Podcasting Apocalypse.
Yeah, that's awesome. So on Monday, we got Brandon Legion, who brings us Horror Wolf 666. Tuesday, Jackie Smith delivers the goods with Into the Necrosphere, the only music-related podcast that I listen to. And, every now and then I drop in on Big Will and the Heavy Hole podcast. You got to represent the tri-state area here. This is a tri-state-based podcast, even though we got dudes from all over the world contributing to this thing. It's stationed here in the New York, New Jersey area, so we got to represent those guys. That's why I shout out Big Will. Wednesday, of course, is Everything Went Black. Thursday is Necromaniacs, horror podcast I do with Jeff Kashid and Mike Scandato. And you guys probably know all this stuff already, but we talk about movies specifically. Every now and then we might have a special guest. We've had like the Addams Family on, talk about their films, that kind of thing. Sunday is Soul Knocks, brought to you by Carl Hikara. And that's a great show if you're interested in the occult and dark topics, the esoteric stuff. And Carl and I are actually doing a collaborative series called Darkness Weaves, where we are talking about the work of Carl Edward Wagner, a very underrated weird fiction, dark fantasy, horror writer who's you've probably seen things that have influenced by him, but not know exactly who has influenced those things. If you've watched True Detective specifically, or the Blair Witch Project, his influence is all over both of those things. And coincidentally, Carl and I are going to be recording an episode on Styx, a short story which actually addresses the very things that I talked about in those shows. So check that out too, and that's on Sunday.
Yep, cool group of people. We have a chat, like our Facebook chat, where we always share stuff, and that has an influence on the episodes. And it's a cool little network, and a lot of people seem to follow all those shows and tag along and comment, which is awesome, and like a real sense of community here on the terrible thing that is the internet.
The internet has brought me so much fucking misery in my life. I got to be honest, man. Like a lot, some good things, but lately just negative shit has been piling into my life from the internet. So just, it's cool, but I'm not online as much as I used to be. Yeah, I might post some stuff on Instagram, and that's about it. Like I don't really go on Facebook. We have a Twitter account, but it's auto posted. People, you got to know me or be on the Patreon, basically. So that's like. I can't deal with the negativity anymore, man.
Yeah, it's I never fucked with Twitter, and I probably never will. But I think it's the biggest cesspool that there is. Like people know that I'm really into pro wrestling, so like aside from the Horsemen, like probably the most podcasts that I listen to are like wrestling related podcasts, and all the comment sections, if they post something on Facebook, it's like I fucking hate the laughing smiley that you can post on Facebook, and you see like news posts about, oh, this person died, and you have people like post laugh smiley. It's just like I want to punch everybody. So I stay away from like Twitter, from the comment section on Facebook, and yeah, it's terrible, man. It's just so much anger and hate, and everybody wants to be the number one. Like I know more than the next guy, and it's just like, oh, what the fuck? Yeah,
dude. So yeah, you can hit me up on Instagram and stuff, Messenger. That's cool. Like as long as you're like cool and you don't attack me or anything like that, that's fine. But Patreon, of course. We got those are like the guys that we all are sort of on the same page, so we communicate freely over on Patreon. And that's about it, man, with the internet. So what's today's topic, Ralph? Let's get into this.
Yeah, it's a sunshiny Sunday, and it's Mother's Day. So what better thing to talk about than death? Yeah, so after the Metaphysics of Fear, which was our first installment, and if you haven't checked that out, please go out of your way to listen to it. Today we're going to talk about, the little thing called death. the idea of these episodes is to go into, yeah, like the varieties of topics that are touched by this very thing, like the subjects in our lives, in our culture, in philosophy, in our thinking. And I mean, we talked about a bunch of shit that we could do, like for the metaphysics of. And I think death is just so obvious because we've both been shaken by death the last years. And yeah, so I had the idea, and like last time I prepared 3 taglines which are stolen from art that we have, which to me represent various chapters and topics we could talk about that relate to death. And so I try to structure it that way, that we will have like a tagline, and then I just like throw some questions in the room, we'll talk about it, and then after a while we go on to the next one. Yes.
I love that format, man. It's great.
Yeah, it's sometimes I feel like my teaching is really like influencing the way I operate things, but like I love to have things with structure. And I mean, like when I teach English, like I said before, like I teach kids to actually like use the English language, not like they don't read a lot of like English books, but you also have to like structure papers and all this shit. And I always love like things that are clearly structured and you can follow along. And if you want to take a break, you know, you can say like, okay, I finished the first chapter and then I go on to the next one. So like the worst books to me to read are the ones that don't have chapters, which is just like 800 pages back to back. It's always like, I need like a little break here. But yeah, sometimes it works that way. But no, like we have the structure here. And should we dive in?
Let's do it.
All right. So the first thing I thought about, which also relates to an episode we did recently, is the tagline here is "Death is just the beginning." And what I want to talk about is, what do you think, Mike? What comes after you die?
I would like to believe that something comes after you die, but with my most recent experiences with death, I just believe it ends. Everything is over, and you're just disappear into the vortex, you know?
Yeah. You're not raised religious, are you?
Or I was actually. I was raised Roman Catholic. Yes.
Okay. So in your life, like the actual like the book, the good book, and your elders, they told you that if you're a good Christian, you will have you will regain like some sort of existence afterwards in a paradise, and if you're not a good person, you will go to hell, I assume, right?
It wasn't so much like the hell stuff, you know, but it was your typical Italian American, you know, Roman Catholic kind of vibe where no one was really that religious. We just went to church on Sunday, and I went to religious, you know, it's called CCD, Catholic something or other, like where you had like aside from school, you'd go to like once a week to this thing that taught you about the Catholic religion, basically Roman Catholicism, and then you had to do that to get confirmed and all that sort of stuff. So that I had a confirmation, you know, and all that stuff when I was a kid. And somewhere in my teens, I started drifting away. Maybe it was after starting to, you know, getting into all the stuff that we got into, like, you know, horror and Lovecraft and listening to extreme music and stuff, you know, and punk rock and opening up to these different ideas and philosophies, and I drifted away from religion right around that time too.
Yeah, I wasn't raised religious at all. My grandparents were all Catholic, and my father actually like dropped out early on. And I mean, my dad and I don't have like the best of base of existence or coexisting. And there's a lot of things that I think he did wrong in his life. But one thing to this day that like sticks with me, which I really appreciate, was when every one of my friends started going to church for these classes to prepare for confirmation. And my dad was like, "So you want to go there as well, I assume?" And like, well, they all get presents in the end. And I'm like, and he was like, yeah, I'll just buy you the bike that you want when they all get their presents. So next year you will get the bike and you don't have to go to church. And when you're old enough to make up your own mind, you decide if you want to go to church or not.
Oh, that's excellent.
So yeah, and so like he told me why he's not religious and why he doesn't believe in the system, and that's why also, like, in consequence, I'm not, I don't want to say brainwashed into, but like I'm not raised to believe that there's something after death. I also just think like you have this one chance to do everything right, to live the best life, to be a good person by your own rights, not because you want to be a good person because God tells you so. It's just like I try to be the best version of myself and be a nice person because I think it's the only chance I have. And if I fail, well, then I fail, and then I'm dead at some point, and I'm just gone, and no one will care about this. I'll be like dust and forgotten in a few years. But I don't think in anything like a paradise. And that's also what is interesting when I teach philosophy in school, and death and dying is a subject that we teach like as a subject in philosophy. It's in the 10th grade, so when they're like 15 and 16. And it's so crazy to see that these kids have no idea about this because it's such a taboo to talk about this at home. Yeah.
Yeah. And at a young age, like you're definitely, sort of indoctrinated into whatever religious beliefs your family has, and you probably don't even understand that there's other philosophies out there. Like I'm sure you guys probably talk about like Arthur Schopenhauer and that sort of stuff, which is like, oh, that's great. That's great to at a party, to start talking about Schopenhauer's philosophies. If you want to if you really want to score big with the ladies, like start talking about that kind of stuff, and that'll really bring the room down,
Yeah. Yeah, and it's just so crazy how now, like I'm 43 now and I've seen a lot of shit go down, and it's so crazy to see like how protected these kids are. And protected, I mean, in this sense, in a negative way, because they never had the chance to think for themselves, because especially like the Muslim kids that I teach, the Muslim system is really strict. I mean, I taught a Jewish kid once, but like the Jews, we don't have a lot of Jews here. I wonder why.
I didn't want to say nothing about that, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I have like a lot of Christian kids that choose to go to philosophy classes instead of religion, because that's like, it's at the same time and you can choose. But like the Christians, like some of them are raised pretty strict and they go to church all the time, and like most of them are pretty chill. So you go to church at Christmas or something and you pray when it's like when it's comfortable to pray. But the Muslims, they're like all hardcore at what they do. It's like, like you have to have the five with the columns of Islam that you have to go through. You have the Ramadan, and you have the service on Fridays in the mosques, and they're like if you're a Muslim, like most of them are like straight up like hardcore Muslims, but not in like a negative way hardcore, but like they live by the book, and for them it's clear whatever they do, God will judge them, Allah will judge them, and it will lead their way to paradise in the end to be a good Muslim. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know many Muslim people from my gym and also coworkers. Like the guy who runs the program I work for at my job is Muslim. My former boss was Muslim, and they're devout, but they're also not extremists. That's like what people get hung up on in the United States, and maybe even globally. I don't know, but like, and even within Islam, this could be a whole other episode, is like the differences between the Mecca and Medina versions of Muhammad's philosophies too. There is one, there's the extremists latch on to one aspect of Muhammad's writings, and the more, peaceful, I would say mainstream Muslims kind of take in the whole picture and assess things differently,
Yes, of course. And that's like a question that comes up all the time in these classes. Like, why do people, like these kids ask me, like, why do so many people hate us? Like for our beliefs. I'm like, yeah, that's like the same as it always is. You have 98% of people doing a thing right, and you have 2% that fuck up everything for everybody. You know, like we're having in school, like the kids, when they go to toilet, they have like these chip cards and there's no toilet paper. So they have to go to the janitor and have to get toilet paper to then take a dump or a piss. Because like then they complain, it's like, this is so ridiculous. I have to go to get the paper and then go to the toilet.
Yeah.
And then that's like, yeah, then we tried it again, like the teacher staff, like we provided toilet paper, and it took exactly one day until one jackass stuffed all the toilets and flushed them. See, and that's like, that's always the example I give to them. It's like, you know, like they want to use cell phones in school, like, and I'm like, yes, 98% of you would like just like listen to music, watch some TikTok videos in the breaks. That's all cool. But 2% are assholes that film teachers or film other kids getting like beaten up or shit. And that's the same thing. Like 98% of Muslims are cool and chill and they live their religion and they don't harm anyone. And you've got 2% of assholes that fuck it up for everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You know, so.
Yeah. But yeah, but like drifting away here, but so they all have this belief, and to them, like when I say as an adult in front of them, teaching them, it's like, okay, he knows about religions and he knows about these topics, and it's like, what do you believe? And I'm like, I believe at one point my heart will stop, my brain will stop functioning, my circulatory system will stop, and I will compose, and then that's that, and there's nothing after that. And that's to them, it's such a horrible belief, and which transitions to, I mean, we talked about fear. I think, and that's like another statement in the first chapter here I want to do, is I think that fear and the fear of death is the capital that religion is actually built on.
I tend to agree with that. I think that especially monotheistic religions, I think that maybe the pagan religions had more to do with describing and understanding the world around them, and death was just a component of that. Because in a lot of, there's so many different ways to talk about that, but like, you know, with like say the pagan religions of say England, you know, Britain, you know, like the Cernunnos and the Green Man and all that kind of stuff. Like the underworld wasn't necessarily a bad place. You know what I mean? And
yes.
Death was part of more of the natural cycle of things. It wasn't like this monolithic, you know, thing that we're all afraid of. And but the monotheistic religions, that's when death, they probably meditated more on death and looking at their lives, you know, ancient, living in the desert, you know, and you know, toiling away, and there's got to be something better than this, you know, maybe possibly. That's possibly why I think that fear of death might have played into the way those religions sort of assemble themselves, you know.
Yeah, and especially I think like when you go back to the monotheistic, their bargain ship, which made them so successful, and that's why these churches are so incredibly powerful and have so much money, is because they were preying on the fear of death, because people don't know. That's the only question you can't answer with like science. I mean, there's been experiments with it and everything, but like no one has an answer what happens after death. So that's the biggest belief question there is, and I think it's the even bigger question than is there like, do you believe in an entity called like God or Allah or Jehovah or whatever? You know, it's like I think this unknown, this aspect that there is something we cannot wrap our heads around because we just don't know what happens after that, is like the biggest question that people like have to test their beliefs in. And that's why I always challenge them in school, and they're like, no, we'll all go to paradise. It's like, then prove it. And they're like, no, I know it. Like, no, you don't, because there's a difference between knowing and believing, and you're believing, but you don't have a scientific proof to tell me otherwise.
Yeah, you know, and also the other aspect of this too is like, you know, the belief that we know everything too, like that even science can just explain things is a very hyperbolic sort of belief. I think that it's
yes,
You know, even within the last like 100 years, we discovered all these things that we had no idea. You know, like magic is we're living in a magical world compared to what someone 100 years ago would think. They would never even comprehend the kind of things we can do right now. But I'm not saying that someone's gonna prove the existence of God or whatever. But like, I also believe that the world that we observe is only one very minuscule aspect of reality. You know, and that the actual function of the universe is probably way more strange than we can perceive it to be, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's I think that's the power that death has over people, and I want to go into that like a little bit more later, like
Sure.
the power that death has on us. But I just thought like, yeah, the question is like, what comes after death is such a significant thing, and that's why I thought like death is just the beginning. Like, yeah, we did this episode on the video magazine, and I'm like, yeah, the sentence kind of resonated with me, and like early on it was just a cool title, and I assumed for them it wasn't more than just a cool title. But yeah, it's like the thing. So what comes next, and that's also a good transition because I mean we're both like fans of horror and shit, and the zombie thing is like really popular, and the undead, and so as the second chapter I want to say, and with strange eons even death may die, the influence of death on culture and art, especially the art that we like so much. Would you agree that death is like the main trigger, like the main focus on like primarily all the stuff that we're into, like music wise and movies and shows and books?
Oh yeah. I mean, 100% for me, man. Like I've always been like a fucking morbid kid. You know what I mean? Like when I was, you know, in high school, man, like when I was a kid, I started formulating how I saw the world and everything. It just, that morose, macabre, you know, sad boy, like fucking shit is like what I was into, man, when I was a kid. Like dark stuff like Sabbath, like listening to Black Sabbath, and, you know, then later on Bauhaus and like Joy Division and you know, movies, you know, The Exorcist was like one of the first films I've ever seen, you know, and that kind of talked a lot. That's about religion as well as entities and death and all that sort of stuff. And Night of the Living Dead, you know, it's like confronting death and this other animated version of it. You know, that those are all early films that I saw. You know, Dracula, you know, the Universal monsters. You know, Dracula living forever. You know, what is that like to not have to deal with death? You know, those sorts of things. Yeah. Big influences on everything.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's let me just write something down here real quick. Okay. That's the thing that I also like gravitate towards. Like I mean we talked about it. You're like, you love the I think your favorite like of these mythical like creatures, you could call it, like the werewolves.
Yeah.
And like, and I'm like always obsessed with vampires.
Right.
So shout outs to Carl Hikara for doing like the vampire episodes, and on his, I think it's also on his Patreon now. It's like such a crazy idea. It's like these entities that live forever, and they live because they kill others and use their fluids like blood as their fuel. And yeah, man, it's just like all the stuff that we're into. If you go back and like, I don't know like how far back you can trace horror literature, but most people say like Edgar Allan Poe or E.T.A. Hoffman, and these people were like the originators of like the horror genre. But if you actually like read the Bible and some parts of the Bible, that's like already like a fucking nightmarish horror scenario right there. And yeah, it's all based upon, in the end, we will all die, you know, like the final judgment. And I mean, we spoke about the religious aspect, but that's like how the whole industry is set up on this. And I mean, I have like a bunch of books, and I assume you're like, I have way more books. You're like way more well read than I am, but like, I think we're both equally on like movies and shows. Sure. We're like obsessed with that shit. And like, if I think about like which movies that I love that are not revolving around death or something, it's like there's not a lot. Like it always plays a part, even if it's not like a drama or anything. Like death is mostly a trigger to something, or the fear of death, and like couples getting together and having kids. And it's like, yeah, because that's the life goal and everything. And we have to make everything from the time that we have. And you see all these people out there, especially like when you use dating platforms, and everybody's like, oh yeah, positive vibes only, and I'm surfing and I'm deep diving and I'm snowboarding, I'm doing all this crazy shit. It's just like everything is like we only have limited time and we have to make the best of it. And yeah, I mean, we fill ours with like art that revolves around death. Yeah.
And creating art that revolves around death, and just darkness, yeah, just real quick about the werewolf, man. Like werewolves to me are like the ultimate life affirming monsters, really, if you think about it. They exist in the moment. When you become a werewolf, you have like I love the idea of that. I love being able to be two things, to have like the rational side and then just the animalistic, completely driven by desires and dark passions side. And that's when you turn into a werewolf, you just go out and you kill people and you eat them and, do all sorts of werewolf stuff, and then you wake up the next day and you're all back to normal, and yeah.
And I think that's also like that was one of my ideas for like a third installment or like a fourth. I don't know like where we're going with this, but I think like the reason versus nature aspect of men, which is like exactly the thing that werewolves portray. Because the biggest difference between werewolves and vampires is werewolves are living beings and vampires are dead.
Yes.
And like I mean, we all carry this inner wolf, like the animal, like the instincts that we have, and we have to fight them with reason. And like being a werewolf is just giving in to all the instincts, and these instincts take over. That's such an interesting metaphor, like which is also turned into like it's an interesting story. But in the end, what makes the people afraid, and that's also what I wanted to talk about, is like what is the thing in horror movies or in movies in general? What do you think that scares people more? The act of being killed, like the horror of being slaughtered by, I don't know, Art the Clown or a werewolf, or being like drank by a werewolf or eaten by zombies? Or is it the thing that you won't be on Earth anymore and you don't know what comes after?
I think it's the latter. I think that it's not taking that step into the unknown, and then actually confronting all of your belief systems and finding out that maybe you were wrong your entire life. And I like to point to the Ex Oblivion short story by Lovecraft, where that's kind of the thing. This guy just wanted to die. He thought he had a glimpse into another world that lay beyond the portal of life and death, and he killed himself. And then as he was approaching this portal, he realized there was just nothing on the other side of the door. And that's like probably the most horrifying story I've ever read, knowing that this guy took it in his own hands to make this step, and then he realized he was wrong about everything.
Yeah, I remember when we did the episode on that, like, and I mentioned it back then, and I still haven't tracked it down, because like, as this is so bleak and that's such a horrifying, it's almost as horrifying as like there's this French movie with a guy who's looking for his girlfriend, which like the girl was abducted at a gas station, and he does like all the research, and then he finds the actual person that abducted her. And he asks her I have no idea what the name of this movie is. If someone knows it, please let me know. But like it ends up that he finds the guy that did it, and this guy asks like, okay, there's two options. You can either go now and we will never know what happened to her.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Or I'll give you sleeping pills and you will find out the next day exactly what happened to her. You know what I'm talking about?
I do. They remade that in the States too, but I can't remember the title of it.
Yeah, and it's just like the end of this thing is like, it's kind of like the Ex Oblivion thing is like, do I actually really want to know what's on the other side? But yeah, I mean, in this case, of course, I think not knowing what happened to your loved one might drive you crazy and make your life miserable. And it's likely it won't end like in this movie. But yeah, man, it's like this thing that it's like so bleak on the other side. And there's this fucking South Park episode that I still can't track down. It also, like, which goes back to the first part. I remember that also, like, if there are South Park fans out there, maybe you can tell me which episode it is, where something happens in the town and everybody gets killed. And all of a sudden you see like this image of hell, and everybody's in hell, you know, like the Muslims and the Jews and the Christians, and everybody is there. And they're all like, what the fuck, man? I always went to church. I always went to the mosque, and I was like a loyal Christian and blah, blah, blah. And then like a helper of Satan comes out and says like, well, Mormons. The right answer would have been Mormons. And then you see heaven, and it's just like God is sitting on his cloud, and there's just Mormons, and it's super boring. And he's like, oh, damn, I chose the wrong religion. And it's just so like this idea of like this cartoonish thing. But it's this always the question, what comes after this thing? And I think when people see it, and I mean, if I go back, like, we've both seen a lot of movies with gruesome death scenes, and like talking about like this now very popular character with Art the Clown, and you know, everybody knows the Saw scene and first one, and everybody knows like the bed scene where the mother comes in and the second part. Right. That's like atrocious stuff, and it's like no one wants to go through that. But in the end, the fear is like, yeah, like what comes next? Yeah,
you know, or even like, you know, Martyrs is my favorite movie that confronts that concept too. You know, where the whole idea of that. For anyone who hasn't seen Martyrs, it's like the French version of the original. Seek that out, the Martyrs, where they talk about the whole movie. The whole thing is about this cult trying to find out what lies beyond the door in oblivion. You know, is there something, you know, and it's unresolved at the end of the movie. And they torture these people, and the idea of a martyr. And, you know, the whole concept is that all these historical martyrs have this like beatific look on their face as they're dying, and they must be looking into heaven, you know, and the release from this mortal coil, you know, as they transcend life. And that's what the whole point of the movie is. Like, what the fuck is going on there? Like, why? Like, what is beyond this doorway that into the unknown? And the movie, in a very French way, doesn't fucking resolve. It makes you, you put you through this 90-minute of anxiety and punishment, and then you still don't know the answer at the end.
Speaking of this, so funny that it's not funny. I kind of expected this because I know you love that movie so much, but I actually haven't seen it. Oh. And there's this small cinema in another part of Cologne that always has like a very well curated program, and they just did like in the vein of the new Cronenberg movie, made like a body horror special. So like they had like various body horror movies every week, and now they will do a special on the French Extreme, and they will show Martyrs in cinema. And I could go there, and my question is, you know, like I'm a wimp. Right. It's like I can take stuff, but like, will I leave cinema watching Martyrs, or will it be that good that I stick around for the violence?
You know, the violence is not that extreme in that movie. It's more of conceptual, man. Like I mean, there's violence in it for sure, and there's like gruesome stuff, but it's not like one of these extreme horror movies where there are people getting sawed in half and they're, you know, like entrails being ripped out. You know, it's not like that at all.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not an extreme horror. I'm not a big fan of that stuff either, to be honest. Like extreme horror, you know.
Yeah, that's good, because like I love that cinema, and I thought like, because I just know pictures and it looks really bleak and dark, so like I'm like seeing this in the cinema might make more sense than watching it on my TV at home. Yeah,
I've never seen it in a theater, man. I would love to, you know.
Yeah, yeah, that's the small cinema. They're so cool at what they do. I mean, like one of the first thing when they opened is like having a Hellraiser double feature of like Hellraiser 1 and 2. And then like a week later they showed Rambo 1, 2, and 3 back to back for one night for like 15 euros. It's
Damn.
crazy. So yeah, they have it's very well curated. So yeah, I'll probably see that. Yeah. Yeah, the thing is also my question to you, are you more afraid of the process of dying or of being dead,
No,
if at all?
that's a great question, man. I think I'm more afraid of the process of dying, really. As I'm getting older, I see my body starting to change, and it's like already I can feel like myself dying, you know what I mean, in a certain way. And I hate it. I don't like that. I don't like, looking at gray hair and wrinkles and, understanding that like my skin looks a little bit different, like that kind of stuff. So I imagine old age is probably going to be a very bad time for me,
Mm. Yeah, it's the same here. I'm really not afraid of being dead. Like I don't know, like this maybe the pessimist in me is like there's I try to do the best that there is right now, but if like a truck would kill me and like run me over and I'm dead, like I wouldn't mind. Like I don't care. I mean, in that moment, no, like there's no chance to care. But like I don't think if there would be a life after this, I would be like, oh shit, man, I missed so much. But I really don't want to suffer. I really, like when I think of like how I want to die, I want it to be quick and painless, or just sleep in and never wake up, stuff like this. To me, like the idea of being, I don't know, being hit by a car and then you're like lying there and you're maybe brain dead and you're not like cardiac, you have like brain death and not cardiac death, and you're just like sorry the word, but you're a vegetable, like lying around and waiting until someone pulls the plug, or being in pain, forever. I remember my grandfather, like and that's like, I think that kind of shaped like my view and everything. Like my mother's father, he was to me the most important person in my family, and he was the first to go. Like it was the first time that I was forced to deal with death, and he had prostate cancer. And like this generation, they were like, oh no, I don't go, like I will have no one stick a finger up my bum, like I won't get checked out. And then they all die of these fucking things. And like prostate cancer is like both my grandfathers had it, my father deals with it, so like I know what I'm in for. So I go to screenings and checkups, and I'm like I hate when people say, oh, it's gay, and fuck you. It's like it's so dumb. But yeah, man, so like I saw him. And I remember, I mean, I was 16 back then, and he lived in Frankfurt, and like it's like 40 minutes from where I grew up. So every other day, my mom and I and my sister, we drove there and went to the hospital. And like seeing him turn into like a living skeleton is like to this day something that creeps me out.
Yeah.
And I remember that I at some point I said to my mother, like, I cannot go anymore. I can't take it to see him like this. So I wrote him a mail, like a letter, like back then, and like I love you, I apologize, like, but it's so hard for me to see you like this. And he answered me like in his squiggly handwriting, because that didn't have any power. And he's like, yeah, I understand, I love you too, I totally get it, and there's no hard feelings. And like 2 days later he passed, and then I hated myself for not going. But it's like this process of your body dysfunctioning and like withering. And I mean, yeah, your parents are older than my parents, but my parents already deal like with a lot of shit, and like it's a thing that will happen. And it's like one of the only certainties in life that we have is that we're all going to die. And I just don't want to have it painful. I just want to be like like I don't care what happens to me when I'm dead. I just don't want to suffer.
Yeah, for my own personal, I don't. I this is gonna sound fucked up, but at this stage, I kind of welcome death, man. I just I don't have any fear of it for me. I think about the people that I might leave behind, and I think about my loved ones dying and how they would. I don't want them to suffer, you know. But
Yeah.
man, in the last few years, I had to deal with so many deaths, like starting, you know, in the 2020 and all the way up until just a few months ago, people were passing that were really close to me. And two of them, excuse me. I mean, I basically, when my aunt passed, she was up in New Hampshire, and she hadn't gone to the doctor like her entire life, and she just like collapsed one day, and they brought her to the hospital, and you know, I won't go into all the medical stuff, but you know, she stabilized for a while, and then she took a turn, and then we got that call like, you guys got to come up here. We think that she's gonna, you know, be passing soon. So you know, we drove up there the day. You know, it was like a weekday. Me and my family, my parents and myself drove to New Hampshire, and at that point, they had taken all the life support stuff off of her, and we were just awaiting. We're all sitting in the room. The one thing I remember is like they had this like little tablet with this imagery of like oceans and playing this like soothing music, and I wanted to fucking smash that thing into pieces, man, because part of me was just like, it made me so fucking angry having that thing on, you know, but I wasn't going to say anything. And my aunt, you know, she just, you know, her dentures were taken out, you know, and like just waiting. And I just remember sitting there and like she's breathing, and unknown whether or not she even understood that, whether or not she was even aware that there were people there. It was unknown. You know, I didn't know, no one knew really what cognitive ability she had. And we were there all afternoon, and then I remember I took just to get some air, because, you know, you have to wear the masks and everything. And my cousin texted me. He's like, you got to come back to the room. She just passed, right? And walking back into the room, just even though she was in this very, very compromised, very much, you know, incapacitated state, she still looked alive. But when I returned to the room, you can tell that she was gone. There's just something about the life leaving the body, and like we just sat there, you know, people were crying, you know. I was surprised that I didn't cry. I cried much later, you know, and it was like I thought about those moments, man, because my cousin, everyone in my family is like religious. My cousin's like, well, you know, she's gonna be with her husband, and I'm like, I didn't want to say that's not what I think, and I was thinking about like the body slowly dying, and like maybe that's how we experience infinity, you know, is those moments as like our brainwaves pass into nothingness. That's that period of time, that brief moment, seconds, milliseconds, that time is infinity for us, maybe. I don't know. You know, that's because when you think about it, you really expand your viewpoint and you go way out into the cosmos. Does time even have a fucking meaning, you know? Like, maybe those milliseconds are infinity in a larger time scale, you know, who knows, you know? That's what I was thinking at that moment. And, you know, and then like my best friend in the entire world passed. And, you know, it's like, it'd be a disservice to her to not mention this during this episode, because, someone I've known very close, the closest person in my life, I've known over half of my life at this point, you know, and, you know, we were together for a long time. We were not together for a long time, but she was still the closest person to me. And you know, I think talking about the body and the body sort of declining, like her decline started years before she passed away, and that was very painful to experience. Like, you know, we weren't together, but you know, she went from being like a very healthy person, very active, to dealing with like all these physical things, going through medical problems, no one really understanding, being misdiagnosed, and this years, probably over the course of 10 years, suffering at varying degrees, dealing with pain, managing pain. And then finally at the very end, like right when during the pandemic, so I couldn't even visit her, I couldn't even see her. It had been a year since I'd seen her, and talking on the phone every day, multiple times a day, you know, providing support for myself and for her, because I was alone down here. I went through the pandemic by completely alone, isolated. And she was, at least at that point, she was living with her stepmother. And, like her family is interesting. I'm not going to go too much into that, but they had a very unusual family, but everyone was very, very close. Even ex-wives and step-husbands and step-children. And it just was a unique family, and everyone was very close and supportive. And, so the whole actually, she's the one who found the apartment I'm living in right now. Like, she was like, you suck at finding a place to live, so let me help you. So this is before the pandemic, and when she was much healthier and vibrant, she like found this place for me to live. Because she's right. I'll live in a tent somewhere. I'll fucking end up living in like oh yeah, we're going to rent you this cave for $3,000 a month or something. That's I would get hoodwinked like that all the time when I was living in Brooklyn, And so anyway, so the whole thing was like, once I get vaccinated, I'm going to come and I'll visit you. I'll stay with you for a few weeks. And I'm like, oh, that'd be great. So we were holding on for that, like just like a time where we could be together again. And just not in like, and just in a way that's like people that like a way where people that really love each other want to be together. And, so during that last year, because I didn't have visual on her, like, we would FaceTime every now and then, but, I just didn't realize like how much she had declined. Like at one point, she was, couldn't get out of bed, she relied on her, her stepmother to, help her get up and do things in the, go to the bathroom and brush her teeth and stuff like that. And, so one day I remember very vividly, it was right when things were starting to open up. My friend JL came down to visit me, and we were going to go see Bambara play in Brooklyn. It was like the first show after the pandemic. And, it was the week that the Sopranos movie came out. And I remember it was the Friday. I was like, all right, cool. I'm going to go train at the gym, in the afternoon. I did a private with my coach, and like, I got an Italian sandwich at this deli, and I was going to watch the Sopranos movie. And I was talking to her on the phone, and I was like, yeah, I got these sandwiches, like whatever, I'm going to watch the Sopranos. And she's like, oh, when I come down there, we're going to have to get an Italian sandwich. I'm like, absolutely. So I watched Sopranos and called her later that the movie kind of sucked. I didn't really like it, and then the Saturday morning I was in contact with her. I was like, gonna head into Brooklyn, gonna meet JL, we're gonna hang out, go to the show. She's like, tell me all about it tomorrow. So Sunday came around. I texted her in the morning and I didn't hear back, and I was getting nervous. And then JL and I went out to lunch, and we were like sitting in the apartment, and then I saw my phone light up, and it was her mother, and her mom was just like, not to mince words, just she passed away just like that, like just out of the blue. It just was her time to go, man. And once again, I was obviously very upset and in disbelief, but I didn't cry until hours later, man, because I had to bring JL to the airport and hold it together. And then I was driving I told my parents, and I was like, I got to go to Boston. Or at this point, she was living in Boston with her stepmother. I'm like, I got to go up to Boston and sort all this stuff out. And then that's when I cried. Like once I left the city and driving, and I was in Westchester County, and just this wave came over me, and I just burst into tears, and like just like the deepest, most intense pain I've ever experienced. And and then I was at my parents' house, and I went, and I helped deal with all the the funeral things, and I was dealing that whole week. I took off, and I was staying with my folks, and the cremation and all that, and the final viewing of the body, and that was it. That was the only time I got a chance to see her, was after a whole year. It was when she was passed. She was gone, and that's, you look down at the body, man, and it's just like, it's material, you know. It's not there. It's just a piece of material, you know.
Yeah.
And I was aware of just like the smell of flowers, and you know, maybe that's like, you know, there's like other odors that they're trying to mask with this scent, and I was just very, you know, because she was being cremated, so there was no, you know, they didn't do any kind of like treatment or anything. They just, you know, treated her exterior, but there was a very much this, okay, we got to like incinerate this body into ash now. And that was the thing that fucked me up more than anything, was like getting this little container of ash, man, which I have in my bedroom right now. And that's not going to get packed away. That's going to travel with me when I go to my new place. I'm not going to put her in a fucking box, and, you know, have it move her to my new place. But like, you know, that was, you know, it's just, it's like, they just don't exist anymore, you know?
Yeah.
And it's so fucking intense, man, to think about that. And that's like the realest thing I've ever dealt with, man. And it fucking haunts me to this day, dude. All this stuff, you know, even my aunt and the other people that passed away, just, it fucking, you know, really, really, it just fucking haunts me, man.
It's like, and you know, like I'm a really not a violent person, but I remember like when my grandfather passed, and also some like after Audrey, I had to put down Audrey last year.
Yeah.
The sentence, she's in a better place now.
Oh man.
That actually makes me want to kill another human being, you know? Like that's like the worst. And it's yeah, man, I mean, I knew the story, and it's so heartbreaking to hear this, and I'm so sorry that you had like to lose her like that, especially like not being there. And I can only imagine. I mean, I have to say, like, I know this. I mean, the chapters by this point here is like completely like through, and the last, but it actually fits because the last like tagline I had was "Death is the road to awe," which is a song from the soundtrack of The Fountain, which which is a movie that deals with Hugh Jackman losing the love of his life, his best friend, and he's trying to save her in different. I mean, it's a weird Darren Aronofsky time travel movie in a way. The movie is really impressive visually. From the story, it's heartbreaking, but all in all, this movie just doesn't really like get me in the way I think it should. But the soundtrack, I mean, we spoke about it a lot of times, you know, that how much I love this music, and especially the track "Death is the Road to Awe." This is probably the thing that will play at my funeral for the 3 people that will attend.
I'll be there.
And
or maybe I'll be gone before you probably, but yeah.
Yeah, dude. Like, let's make like a pact that like we don't have to suffer through each other's funeral. That would be cool. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, I wanted to talk about. I mean, we spoke a bit about the cultural aspect of horror and music. And yes, you have written songs about death. I've written a whole record about death with last year's author record. Yada yada. The key ingredient here is, and that's why I thought like the cultural aspect with horror movies, and it's like in like I don't know, like just in the middle of things, but like this thing you just talked about, like the real process of witnessing death and dying. Death is the road to awe is like, is there anything that like reminds us more how insignificant we are than maybe space, nature, and death? I don't think so. Death is like almost like an all-powerful God itself when we go back to the beginning, an unstoppable force. And people try their best in science to stop it. Has always been the dream of like the pill that makes you live forever. And there's cryogenetics and all this stupid bullshit. And I just think like what you just described is like, it's like this huge tidal wave that will roll over you and you cannot stop it. And I'm not afraid that it will roll over me and take me. I don't care. But I'm afraid for like, I mean, I think probably the toughest thing I had to go through was Audrey's death. And Audrey, for those who don't know, was my cat. But for the last 5 years, I've been single, and she's been here. She's been the light of my life. And Yeah, maybe that's like some people will say, but yeah, it's just an animal, but like not to me. Like she was my sunshine and my everything. And last year in October, like after 4 months of knowing that she will die, like she has to put down at some point, like the moment came. And like a few weeks ago, the week before Easter, on the 6th of April, I woke up and I felt terrible, and I didn't know why. It was just like this, like this feeling of dread when you know something terrible is going to happen, or when you have exams coming up.
Yeah.
I woke up with this feeling, and I walked out, and I mean, my couch, and like there are these two little blankets, and usually they're like on the left hand side of the couch. And I don't know why, but the evening before I folded it, and it was on the corner, on the front corner of the couch. And it was exactly the way where I laid down Audrey when the veterinarian came and gave her like the last shot to put her to death.
Yeah.
And I looked on my calendar, and I saw it's exactly to the day 6 months, like half a year since she's been gone. And in that moment, like I usually conduct myself really well, and I can deal with grief, and that's like the actual point I want to talk about. And the last part here is grief. I thought like I dealt really well with it, but in that moment I saw that I pushed it away so hard because I didn't want to deal with grief, and I just burst into tears. I fell to the floor. I had no my knees just gave in, and I was lying there crying like a baby. I'm like, fucking hell, like I never experienced something like that. And I'm a state in my life where I feel like not a lot of things actually feel like I don't feel anything. Like a lot of times, everything is just so insignificant and doesn't matter. But the death of my little girl, man, that's like, it was the most painful thing. And I think starting with the death of my grandfather, which I spoke about, tried to, like, in my heart, I set up this wall to like not have these feelings come through. I got hurt in my life so often, and it started with the death of my grandfather, which was the toughest thing then. And like it showed me again with dealing with the death of Audrey, and now it all breaking open, like it's an open wound that just won't heal. But now I'm actually dealing with it, and there's like studies that you have to deal with grief. And I mean, that's kind of what you said, like upon hearing of her passing, and then you're like, oh no, I have to function. I have to drive my friend to the airport. And at one point you just can't hold it back anymore. And then you will, I mean, I know it from you, but like you've felt it like with other scenarios too, that all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you think of that person, or like I do, or like with my cat, and you just start crying. And there's no, as tough as nails as you are, sometimes it just breaks through.
Yeah, definitely, man. I mean, now, I'm packing now. So it's like, there's all these little things, I have a box to like all the stuff that, like are associated with her, and things that I took, like when during the after she passed away, and I was up there in the room that she lived in those last year. There's like pieces of art that she did, and clothing articles. I just grabbed them, and I'm like, I'm gonna hang on to this stuff because it reminds me of her and everything. And but like the full impact of what her life was like that last year when I wasn't able to see her hit me in like a very grim realization of how her life had just degenerated, like because of all the stuff that she needed. Like in the living room there was like a hospital bed basically. And I saw that bed, and I almost fell to my knees, man, because I had no idea really. I didn't see anything. I was imagining her living a regular life, and then all the stuff in the bathroom, the showering aids and things like that. And I was just like, man, I knew, I guess, intellectually, but not really knew how bad things were those last few months. And so yeah, moving, I have like a bunch of stuff, and that box is going to drive with me in the car. I'm not going to have a mover take all these things, and that it's just hard, man. And even aside from that, like every now and then, like something will happen, or I'll hear something or watch something, or something will remind me of her being gone, and I'll lose it. You know, sometimes it happens when I'm driving. You know, I'll be like, you know, driving and something will come to me, and it's just it fucking haunts me, man. You know.
Yeah, it's sometimes it's songs, sometimes it's just something you see that reminds you. And I remember like I put everything, I had so much cat stuff in my apartment and I all put it in boxes. And recently Chris of Otha and he and his girlfriend moved apartments, and so they have a new place and they adopted two cats a while back. And for the whole 6 months now, I held on to every little piece of stuff that I had for Audrey, except for like the food stuff. I gave that to like a shelter. I was like, okay, so what will I do with that? And then it's like they're moving and they have like a big balcony now, so they need like this fish net so they can't fall out. And I still had like these poles and I had the toys, and I'm like, no, you know what? I will let it go now. I have like this one pole in my living room that is still set up with the pictures of Audrey, and this will remain. But like, okay, I'll get rid of this. And I packed like the toys and all that stuff, and it was all easy. And then I opened a box, and there was like a broom. No, not a broom, like a brush where you had to like for fur.
Yeah.
And it still like had like a bit of the white fur on it. And like I sat in my basement just weeping. Like, it's so crazy. That's why I think like, you know, grief is something that you have to allow. Otherwise it will kill you. And that's what I meant with Death is the Road to Awe, that grief is such an almighty power. I would say you can compare, like it's even more powerful than love. But what helps me, instead of people telling me she's in a better place now, is I thought of the metaphor once, and I told it to other people that lost their pets or their loved ones, is like, I think the more grief hurts you, the more is the proof of how much you loved that actual being.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I believe that, you know. I mean, there's a strong emotion, you know, yeah, it's you know, it's still a process, man, for me. And like I said, and I'm just fucking haunted by this whole experience. And even the other, like my other family members, I lost like 4 people, man, in the course of a year. You know, and in the midst of all that stuff, I had a breakup with, you know, my ex who I was together with for 10 years. You know, and like we had a soft breakup like a year before, and like, but we really weren't broken up, you know. But then like the hard breakup came, and then a month later, Kirsten was gone. You know, and it's all these things are just fucking eating away at me and weighing on me for like even now. I mean, I think I'm in a better place these days, but like, you know, last year was rough. The winter was rough, you know, and I feel like now, and that's why I'm moving. Really, it's just because of just the darkness of living here for the last 3 years, and it's a beautiful town. Like I've told you about living here, but it's like there's such a heavy atmosphere that's just on me right now, and I need to have a new chapter and live someplace else. And for a myriad of reasons, I need to live in a more urban environment, just because I can't live in the suburbs. You know, it's just not me, really. You know.
Yeah, and also like the important things, like the memory of her or the loved ones that you lost, like they will travel with you. They will be in small icons in your apartment, and mostly like in your heart. And that's why why it's so it's so difficult to deal with death, because there's nothing habitual that you can actually touch, you know, like nothing remains. Like you said, like with the funeral, that like it was an open casket from what I understood, and that's a thing you don't have here. Like, I don't know if it's even allowed to have like an open casket funeral, but like I've never seen a dead person in my life, and I don't know if I would, like, because like the trauma of my grandfather, seeing him like in this almost this mummified kind of skeleton way with leathery skin is just like haunting. Like whenever I see like scenes in movies that are like kind of like this, you know, it's like I'm like, fuck off, man. Like I can't deal with that. And so like this will travel with you. And that's like as tough as death is, it's like these little pieces of love that you keep around your heart and maybe make you human and like keeps you going forward. So like the reminder of life is precious in a way.
Yeah, definitely. You know, and you know, I mean, there's been the last like 3 years or 2 years of stuff that I've created, like musically, and there's like a Dark Times era period of stuff that I just finished writing and making. Like the Scorpion Throne EP is like all about this period too, and that's primarily why I never really pushed it with people. It's I just wanted to put it out, and all right, cool. It's more for me. It's 100% for me. To get it, to work on it and write the lyrics and put things together and make it it was a cathartic way to deal with a lot of the intensity of these feelings of losing her, and dealing with the death and the grief, and then casting it out into the world just made me feel better. But that's why like I don't talk about it that much. I don't really like, hey, check this out, this is my new band, or there's like interviews, or Andrew and Mike, the guys that are on the record in the band with me, they don't have that experience with it. So it's like Andrew found a guy to like put it out on cassette and everything, which was cool. But the next Scorpion Throne stuff is going to be a little bit different, a little bit more. All this weight is off of it, so it's going to be more of just like a fun sort of project, I guess, after this.
I see, and that's why I like funny in like quotation marks, not actually funny, but like when you like told me about Scorpion Throne and you sent it to me and you told me like, yeah, there's like way more influence, like Jeff Whitehead's work is way more influential on this than on Tombs or stuff.
Yeah.
And then I thought about like when all this happened with your friend and the music that came out of it. I'm like, this is your Lurker of Chalice record.
Pretty much. Yeah. I mean, and I know like what Jeff was dealing with during that period, not, in so many words. Like I know Jeff, but not that way really. But it's pretty clear what was going on in his life on that record.
If you like see that One Man Metal documentary, that Vice magazine, he talks about her, and like that like explains it pretty well. That's why I had to like the connection to this. To like rally up the troops here and finish off, I want to do like 2 quick fire questions, short answers. But of course, it's not like that easy. But the first one, I think I know your answer, and it's easy. The second, maybe not so much. Imagine there would be a pill that cures diseases and makes life eternal. Would you take it?
No.
If that very pill would exist, would you have given it to your friend?
Yes.
Yeah. I would be the same thing. It's so egotistical to say that and do that, but I'd be the same way. Yeah.
Yeah. Like the worst part about that, man, it's like, like fucking that. One of the things I thought about so much was like when she passed, and I was just thinking about like fucking, why did she have to go? Why couldn't I go? Why did it have to be her? I went to the doctor, and the doctor's like, you're fucking in great condition for a guy your age. Not even for a guy my age. He's like, you have the physicality of a professional athlete, dude. He's like, you have like all your blood work, your fucking EKG, your heart rate is I'm like 49 beats per minute. Like I have like the fucking physical of like a guy who like is a pro, like fucking fighter or something like that. And it's like why can't I fucking have had like you have like 3 weeks to live, something like that, and yeah, I would totally I would not take the pill to live forever, but I would give it to my loved ones for sure. I would give it to her specifically.
Yeah. But then in consequence, like you would have to take it too at some point to, like otherwise you would like curse this person to live forever, and she or he would like suffer it. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess you're right. So that's
that's
the dark side of the question. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, like that's this thing actually, like that's from one of my teaching books in philosophy. That was these 2 questions to discuss with kids, and like the pros and cons. But like that would fill up like a complete new episode, and I think we've pretty much conquered the grounds that we wanted to conquer. And I guess success. Like there was another really deep episode. I'm really happy how it turned out.
Yeah, I hope people get something out of this. I know that like these are uncomfortable things to talk about, but that's we push the envelope here, and I I just hope people got something out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, man. It's like, as always, comment, let us know what your thoughts are. Maybe if you share like our thoughts, want to share your experiences, especially on the Patreon, like there's a more secluded, like more friendish thing than in the public open space. But yeah, reach out to us if you want to talk, and we'd be glad. Like this is supposed to be make people think and go into it. So there's always fun episodes about music and movies. There's a lot of this, but I think it's cool to sometimes go into like these core elements and elementary things. But yeah, maybe we'll end up doing like the metaphysics of fun, or the metaphysics of porn or something. I don't know. Like we can talk about fun things. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, man. Maybe the next one will be a little bit more uplifting than this. You know?
We'll see. But yeah, thanks.
All right, everyone. Thanks for hanging in there. And yeah, let us know what you think, and we'll talk to you next week. Take care.